Hey everyone, it's Jeff Claubert with the EstesGroup. Time to get started with our event. So I'm really excited to do this today, and I want to thank you all for joining. We've got a great team lined up here. We've got 3 of our own experts, and we have Tim Grubbs from Epicor here to talk on, to actually show you some amazing tools that will help you smooth out an upgrade and minimize any disruption to your business. So let's get started. As you can see, I'm joining you from my Mad Marketer's lair up in New Hampshire. Today, we've got all 4 of us joining from 4 different states. As a matter of fact, at EstesGroup, we have people in 22 different states, so we're spread around. A bit of housekeeping. We definitely want your questions. We want to drive engagement. So enter them in chat. We'll kind of manage it that way. And the formal Q&A will actually be at the end of the session, just to make sure we get through all the sections. Because I know there are certain pieces of information that people really want to have. Tim's actually going to be showing a demo of the upgrade tooling and the analyzer, and I believe even CloudView. So you'll want to see that. So we're going to keep the Q&A till the end. If we don't have a chance to get through all of them, we will definitely get back to you one-on-one and make sure you get your questions answered. And during the event, I may pull a question in every now and then if it really fits. So give me your best questions, and if they're really great, I'll pull them in. So we're going to have a replay available. This is being recorded, and after the event is over, you'll be able to register to receive your own copy of that. And if you want the actual slides, these are actually pretty valuable slides. We're sharing, our best stuff here. So we're not going to make them generally available, but on a case-by-case basis, and for most of you it would be fine, just contact Ben Nixon directly, and you'll have his contact info as we go through the presentation here. And I would urge you to take a picture of the screen when the contact info comes up, and also you'll be directed to a landing page at the end of this to register, request slides, and you'll see our direct contact information as well. So just some quick introductions here. Brad Feeks and Tim Grubbs are our primary presenters. Brad's a director of technical consulting with us. And Brad's actually out on site today at a client. So, he's going above and beyond. This information is so powerful, though, that we really wanted to get it to you before the holidays, and Brad's schedule is just booked. So he very kindly agreed. He asked his client if it was okay if he could step out for a little bit. I believe they're even on the event as well. So thank you very much, Brad, for being willing to do that. Tim Grubbs is here from Epicor. He's a principal technical solutions architect, and he's the coordinator of the Epicor upgrade program. So this guy knows it technically, he knows it programmatically, and he's going to walk you through these great tools that are available. I was amazed. I was out at the Epicor Ignite conference the other week, and I got a chance to see it firsthand. It's pretty great stuff. Now, we also have Ben Nixon and Bruce Schreiber. Now, many of you know these 2 folks. They're longtime Epicor veterans. So they'll be jumping in and out and providing their own insight as we go along. So we're going to have a nice interactive event here. So topics we're going to cover, I'm just going to start off with just a minute or 2 of who we are as the EstesGroup and why we're relevant to your decision to upgrade, what's important to you. I'll give you a little bit of our background there. Then we're going to jump right into the meat of the program here. We're going to talk just to set the context for this discussion here. We're going to set the stage. What's the business case for upgrading your systems? And, we know you make these decisions, not very often, every 3-5 years, sometimes longer. It's big because anytime you make a change like this, it introduces risks to the operation. That's just inherent in it. There's possible disruption to the business. So this is really crucial. So there are common hurdles that people need to deal with, and that's what Brad's going to be covering today. So we're going to go into a little more detail on what those hurdles are, and then most importantly, how do you overcome those hurdles? Brad's actually going to be sharing specific strategies that he uses to help people get through this. And then finally, like any good project, you need a tool chest. You need the best tools in the world, and that's what Epicor has. And Tim Grubb's going to come on. He's going to show you what those tools are. He's even going to demo them, and then we'll talk about next steps. All right, great. Let's get into this. Just a little background about EstesGroup. We've been doing this a long time. I think we've been doing it for 13 or 14 years or so. And You know, we like to consider ourselves sort of the delta force of ERP. Now, that may sound like a kind of corny thing to say, but you know, and why do I say that? And that's quite a boast. Well, over the past 3 years, over 90% of our implementations have gone live on time and on budget. That's far above the industry average. That's why we say we're the delta force. We're also able to go in and help restart implementations that are struggling or going too long. We're just masters of that. We're really great at doing that type of project, and those can be challenging. So overall, you know, we got 42 W-2'd consultants working for Estes. We have you know, a network of several hundred other consultants that we tap as we need, and our people are senior. They come from the industry. They know manufacturing and distribution processes, over 18 years of experience. Very low turnover. You know, the other thing I'll say is we're here for the long term. We're profitable, we're debt free, and we've got one of the strongest D&B ratings. So you can trust us with these really complex and crucial projects. Some of our differentiators, you know, we focus on having the highest level of certifications in the industry. 100% of our senior staff is certified. And one of the reasons why our projects are so successful is because we use a consistent methodology every single time. We call it PEAK. I won't go through it right now, but we have a methodology that we use consistently, and we're learning every time we go through this. So you can trust us to help you through these really critical transitions in your company. And finally, we have a breadth of service. We can go from brand new implementation, of course, upgrades, you know, re-implementations. We can do process engineering. We understand business process. We understand organizational change. And we can take that right through on-premise to hosted or even cloud. And we also do full IT outsourcing with managed services. So that's a little bit about us. Let's now get into the meat of the program, and let's talk about why you should consider upgrading your Epicor ERP system. You know, I come from a background of digital transformation. I was with, in a previous life, I was with Cisco Systems for 16 years, and I had a global role around helping organizations transform to digital models. And that's kind of what we're talking about on the screen here. There was a major study done by the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. They looked across 12 industries. They surveyed about almost 1,000 companies. And what they found out is that over the next 5 years, nearly half of today's incumbents, now this study was done in 2015, so we're already into it, nearly half of today's incumbents are going to be unseated because things are changing so fast. So the key reason why you need to update is that you need to stay up with what's happening in the industry. You actually need to stay ahead. So there's two classes of people, those that are going to be disrupted and those that are going to be disruptors. So at the Estes Group, we're part of the disruptors. We're helping our clients make these changes, and that's what we suggest you do. So I'll let you go through this slide. I don't need to present it, but that's really what I'm talking about here. The main reason why you need to upgrade is because the world is changing faster than it ever has before. So now what I'd like to do, Ben, if you
yes, I have, Jeff. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Ben, as you know from his Epicor days, he is an expert in performance and tuning systems. And so I'm the marketer guy. I'm going to step away from the microphone and I'm going to bring in the real talent for today. So Ben, why don't you take us these next two slides and tell us about, you know, what we're seeing with the upgrades, why you'd want to do that from a platform perspective. And Jeff, Ben, your microphone will be muted.
So
Great.
First thing you're going to notice is you're going to see an increase in performance with reduced risk. One thing to keep in mind, Microsoft is very upfront as far as when server releases, workstation operating systems are going to end support. And you'll notice in the slide on the left,
Hey, Ben, we lost your microphone.
Extended support dates are coming very quickly. Some of these end in 2020. January 2020 is not that far away. We're coming up on January 2018 already. What you're also going to notice moving forward is reduced risk as long as you stay current. Upgrading is going to keep you current So if you run into a patch or a bug that's not supported, you're not going to sit there and have your IT team wasting time searching for fixes. It can keep you moving forward. Very vital. If you run a compliant business, you're always taking the chance of losing your compliance standings. Need to stay current. The risk of downtime and finding old hardware to replace something is also a big risk. I've seen companies waste a lot of time chasing down 32-bit operating systems or machines that'll support 32-bit.
Hey Ben, you know one of the key things that that struck me too is the change in platforms here in terms of what we were in Epicor 8 and 9 and the major structural changes they made in Epicor 10. Do you want to talk about that for a moment?
So you're moving to a simplified stack. I know a lot of people look forward to this. It's been a great change. You know, in the past, we always had the progress layer involved that added many layers that you didn't need. Epicor 10 moved to what we call a pure Microsoft stack, running Microsoft IIS on SQL Server. Creates a more efficient system, very efficient to use. It takes away a lot of the technology challenges.
Ben, you might have clipped out again. Hey Brad, can you hear me? Just a sound check. Great. Okay. So I think Ben clipped out, I guess, as part of the challenge of running remotely these events, but it's how we can bring them out to you. So the key thing here, you know, is you're now moving to a standards-based stack that's going to see much greater performance. This whole multi-threading is a big one, as I'm sure you know that. So I'm not going to get too far in the weeds here, lest I start going beyond my depth. But, you know, so we've just spent a few minutes talking about the imperatives for upgrading your system. You're probably saying, yeah, I know all that, Jeff, and hopefully I've validated some of your concerns. Let's now address, or some of those reasons for upgrading. Now let's address some of the concerns that you might be looking at, and probably one of the reasons why you signed up for this event today. So with that, I actually want to turn it over to Brad, who's going to take us through those hurdles and how to deal with those hurdles. And I'm going to stop sharing here, Brad, and I'm going to give it to you, make you the presenter.
All right, great, and thank you, Jeff. And I wanted to welcome everyone to our session. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to come and listen to us as we give you our spiel. My name is Brad Feeks. I am speaking to you here from Savannah, Georgia, the home of Victorian architecture and boiled peanuts, of which I'm a fan of both. And I wanted just to thank you again for coming and thank my customer for taking the time to allow me to step aside and skunk out and give this presentation. And really, I wanted to underscore some of the things that we have covered in the past that we've took and consolidated to try to help some of our potential new customers make some of those hurdles. And I will just turn my own camera off here and all right. Okay, great. So the question of why to upgrade, I think, is pretty clear. I think Ben's slides began at least to speak to some of the values of a consolidated stack and a consistent platform and some of the benefits that come from being on such a platform. Nevertheless, there are a lot of companies that are still very much in a concern point in terms of how to upgrade, whether to upgrade. And normally this is due to a couple of basic challenges that I've seen in the past and continue to show themselves. And our discussion today will be working to address some of those. All right, so in principle, it's really great to keep your software up to date. And everyone agrees that, yeah, this is really good. We should keep our software where it is. What often happens in practice is that there are some genuine and understandable practical barriers to getting to keep your software up to date. Quite often these would be manifested as time, as resources, the people you have to do it, the costs required to make these upgrades, because we're not speaking of simple software. Enterprise software is vast scale, and understandably some costs come along with that. And one big concern that really generates a lot of others is just the basic risk that's involved in moving from a legacy platform to a very new platform. That changing of platforms comes with all kinds of risks that are involved. And when I've seen and working with customers, the most common concerns keep coming up at the same time. Those would be how to address the customizations we've done in the previous system, the configurators, product configurators that we've built in the legacy systems, or the custom crystal reports that we've developed. So these all sort of form around a common thread of this is business-specific functionality that's been built by the customer in order to address specific needs that were at the time out of the capability of the system. And those present great challenges because those often become the most difficult things to migrate into the new system. What I want to underscore here is that these risks can be minimized. And when we start to approach the idea of an upgrade, what I found is a lot of the decisions that are made at the onset really can impact these risks and how they are addressed. They give you more or fewer approaches and cards in your pocket to play in order to successfully mitigate some of these risks. And one of the first decisions that I've encountered has to do with the data migration approach. So this really has to do with at the data level. How are you going from a legacy database to an Epicor database? And some of your options may be limited to what you've had in the past. Some of these options are a little different based on how easy it is to extract data from your existing system into the new. But I've seen in general two basic models. The first is what we would call a straight conversion. That is the use of Epicor's conversion tools to move from the legacy system to the 10 platform. That would be the running of all of those conversion routines and such to take your data and reshape it gently into the form that it needs to take to fit into version 10. Now, another version of this approach that I've seen is what I might call data reimplementation. So in this case, the customer chooses to re-implement in 10 entirely and not upgrade their data. Rather, they extract their data, they cleanse it, and then they load it into the new system as a function of a new installation. So in the pluses and minuses of these approaches generally are pretty clear. When you're speaking of a re-implementation, you're probably looking at more time, but what it gives you is more flexibility to better utilize the new system potentially, and to maybe purge yourself of some bad data that was haunting you from your previous configuration. And most often I see this for customers who have been on the Epicor platform for a long time. And since the time they went live and initially configured the system, their market has changed, their product lines changed, the way they respond to the industry has changed. And such, they've seen that, okay, a very significant reconfiguration might be beneficial. And a reimplementation sometimes is the easiest way to make that happen. But as you might understand, this process could greatly affect your underlying customizations and reports and such that are part of that. Another decision that I found to be very important has to do with your functional solution. Now, in this case, I'm talking about your business processes, your procedures, how you're getting from quote to cash, and some of those things could potentially change significantly depending on the new functionality that's available. Now, I've seen sort of, again, two different paths. These are sort of aggregates, and there's a lot of slices in between, but you might classify this functional solution approach as a functional migration, where you basically take your existing processes, you carry them over into your new system, into the legacy 10 or into the 10 system, and you basically run business as usual. I see this most often with companies that are time constrained or budget constrained, where they really just need to get up and get out of the risk of staying on their existing platform and get into 10. For other customers, I've seen what you might call more of a functional reimplementation. And this is where you do a significant reevaluation of the capabilities of Epicor 10. And you look to see where your functionality might change, how you might approach things differently. And quite often, this might give you opportunity to replace some of your custom solutions that were developed in a legacy version with standard functionality out of 10. Because really, what are the reasons that you create custom solutions in a system? It's to bridge some gap that was present that you need to figure out a way to still do something to run the business. Now, those gaps may have been closed in the interim by new functionality. The functionalities having implemented originally in 803, I can speak to this from experience that the capabilities of the 10 platform are quite different in a lot of ways than the earlier 803 version and the iterations since then. These would include some things like package control, some of the financial transaction and driving methodologies for driving transactions in different directions. Some of the reporting, the customization tools themselves have changed significantly. And that all gives a lot of reasons to potentially look at reevaluating how you do your own business. A third decision that I see a lot of customers doing has to do with how you're exactly going to host this application. With the change from the new system comes the possibility and the questions of, well, is my hardware adequate to host this new application? And a lot of customers start looking at what they've been doing in the past with a truncated server stack in a closet and decide, well, maybe we want to approach this a little differently. Maybe we want to host externally into a cloud or externally hosted solution instead of maintaining with an on-premises stack. And there's still a good number of folks who still want to keep it internally and use their internal capabilities in order to host that application. Now, having gotten through some of these big decisions, then you start worrying about, now that that's done, what do I need to do to get over some of these significant challenges in implementing the new system in 10? And really the biggest step at this point, and it seems like the simplest, but it's the one that I've seen missed the most, and I've seen companies benefit from it the most, and that's organize. And really, if you're looking at your custom solutions, these being reports, configurations, or various custom tools from the Epicor stack, understanding what they are and organizing yourself around what is the scope to bring all of this functionality up to 10. Really, because I've seen with a lot of customers, a really common question is, well, what is the scope of your activity? How much custom functionality do you have? And quite often I get some wide-eyed looks that say, I don't know, because turnover exists, companies come in, and new management comes in, new IT management, they take over systems that they did not themselves bring up, and now they're in the position of not necessarily knowing where they were and how they were. And I can also speak from experience that it's very easy when you're implementing to make a lot of little changes, a lot of little customizations here, there, adding UD fields or adding a little BPM here or what have you. It's very easy for those to happen, and happen in a manner where they're not documented and understood. And at the time, that the impact of that lack of information is pretty minor. But as time goes on, and as you start to hit things like major upgrades, those little negligences can be magnified significantly. And really the importance here is, by getting yourself organized and understanding what you have, you start to get a shape of how big an effort this really is. And I'd say that the two biggest things are identification of what you had, and then the understanding of how much these things are being used. And we will jump into that a little bit more. So analyzing and understanding what your custom footprint looks like. There are a number of ways of doing this. Epicor has made great strides for upgrades with their analyzer tool. And I've seen that in action, and that produces a really nice list of a lot of the different things, custom reports, custom dashboards, embedded customizations, BPMs, and the like, that are in an existing system and would thus be needed potentially to be managed in their upgrades. Depending on your version, you can do some similar work right out of the gate in what you have if you are in a version of, say, 905 and using Solution Manager as a way of querying out what do you all have custom that you would need to be concerned with. And if all else fails, there are enough tools in the system to allow you to hunt and peck through what you have to understand, there's probably 10 places in the system where you would need to go in terms of report styles, report data definitions, the embedded customizations that are on a menu, the BPMs that you have, the BAMs that you have. So there's a pretty small list of things that are out there that you would go and find, okay, these are all the things that we've built out there that we may potentially need to organize and put together. Now, determining usage is in a lot of ways a more tricky step to take. But I would say it's immensely valuable in understanding how these items are being used. Now, I stepped on site once with a customer, and they had probably 200 custom crystal reports. And I asked, well, how many of these are being used? And it wasn't known. They really didn't know at this point how many of these crystal reports were still in use. Now, they had been live on 803 for 10 years, and a lot of reports, understandably, had been developed over the years, and it wasn't, entirely certain which ones had been used in replacement of others and which ones had sort of fallen out of usage because they addressed a problem that was no longer the case. Now, what I find is a customer generally benefits from a good 1 to 2 month sample of usage. That's generally representative. I say it's always good if you can cross a fiscal month end and understand what's happening there, because there are some special things that happen only at month end that wouldn't happen otherwise. So that gives you a good idea of what all really is being used. One area where I think is really valuable, I see a lot of customers use this to great effect, is querying the systask history to try to understand what reports or any custom processes are being used in the background. What I've seen kind of varying versions. In some instances, they'll extract that every time they restart the app server. They'll first take and extract that straight out of System Monitor. Others will build BAQs and dashboards to look at that information and query it out that way. But I think systask history, querying those related tables that has to do with the task agent and its functioning on the back-end server can provide a lot of effort, a lot of value. Now, UD fields, we'll talk more about UD fields, but in this case, probably the best way of understanding their usage is to identify, well, how much data is actually in these UD fields? Is it being entered consistently? And when these UD fields are related to common business objects, you can get a feel for, well, how often recently have these fields been updated? Say, for instance, you have custom UD fields on the order header. Order header naturally has an order date on it, and you can use that to compare and see, okay, have these fields not been used since 2013? That might raise the question, are these fields that we still need in the future? And the related functionality that might be built around them, do we need that as well? With embedded customizations, normally the best way, at least out of the gate, is to understand what's deployed to a menu. Now, I've seen with, I would say on average, with most of my customers, there's probably for every customization that's deployed to a menu, there's a customization that's sitting underneath that isn't. And you really don't want to spend any time working on projects that aren't actually deployed to a menu. So I'd say that was normally your starting point. There's probably some ways you want to try to see if there's more value that you can get in terms of, say, a customization is attached to a UD table. Obviously, you can query out that UD table and try to understand where that is. Now, for server items, such as, say, BPMs, what I've seen some customers do in their existing systems before they even start the upgrade process is they'll add some simple logic, simple progress code to their BPMs or what have you to write to the server log, and then review their server logs at an interval to see how often this BPM is actually firing and doing something. Trying to understand that helps go a long way to understanding these are things that I might need in the future. Now, I would say similarly, a lot of these things are retrospective, but you really want to try to look forward as well with your new solution and try to think of, when I build custom solutions in my 10 version, do I also want to try to build in some way of understanding their usage so that I might find myself in the same position in 5 years, 10 years, needing to evaluate and reevaluate? It would be helpful, and basically at any time, to know this information as to what is actually being used out in your system. So when I'm looking at customizations, what we found with customers upgrading to 10 is that there are a lot of different challenges that differ by solution type. Speaking to embedded customizations, sometimes just called form customizations, I haven't seen too much by way of issues. Mostly, the issues we have seen have been like things like, say, method signatures might change in the event that you're front-ending some business object automation and the method signatures change from version to version. Seen some issues with UD fields and getting their bindings correct, especially if you're making changes to your UD fields. We'll talk about that as well. With BAQs and dashboards, those are probably, I would say, the most limited of challenges. The Epicor tool set there is pretty well defined, and they tend to upgrade without issue. Now, as you get into updatable BAQs and dashboards, the situation sort of flips. And we've encountered a number of issues with these, mostly due to the fact that in earlier versions of Epicor, there were capabilities that were permitted in the system that were not exactly perfect. And I call these flawed but functional. So you were able to set up an updatable BAQ and dashboard, but certain amounts of data were missing from that setup. And this missing setup data gets caught by the upgrade utility, and these items break. You're not able to get them to compile, essentially. And I found that there's been the issues where you needed to go in and find where the upgrade mapping is. Mostly, if you're familiar with the upgrade tool, there are a couple of tabs you have for upgrade, and they're the mapping between query fields and business object fields. Some of those end up being missing in earlier versions, and addressing those is generally the issues that we run into. BPMs, these are kind of one of two flavors. If they are menu driven or wizard driven BPMs, they tend to update reasonably well. If they're making call outs to a lot of custom code, this is a bigger challenge. And I've seen, again, this is something I might defer to some of the other folks out there as to what the current version of Epicor does by way of providing a standard upgrade of the Progress 4GL ABL code to C# and what's available there. But really, if you're looking at a major custom code transition, those are areas where I've seen some rewriting required. And this gets to be a challenge depending by business on how well you understood the ABL code you're using and how well you understand the C# coding framework that you're working into. And this, we'll talk about this again as we hit product configurator, because I'd say basically one of the biggest challenges has to do with that migration from ABL to C#. Now with UD fields, another major change occurred with the platform, and how they address UD fields is between what they've done in 8 and 9 and 10. So in 803 and 905, you basically had 20 extended fields of varying data types on each table, and users were able to consume those as needed for their purposes. Now in 10, they've created an extended table functionality. They had something similar in 905, and they've used that basically as the de facto for 10, version 10. And now if you want to add fields to a table, you do it explicitly. You can strongly type them, strongly name them, and add them to a table as an extension. And Epicor's upgrading tools does this by default. It creates new fields based on any fields in the old database that had data in them. Now, the challenge to that, of course, is they create them still calling them number.
Hey, Ben, if you are still here, if you could carry on with you, that would be terrific. All right, folks, I'm going to try to get Brad back. Apologize for the technology glitch here. Hey, Tim, I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things Brad was talking about here had more to do with the UD fields, and the way the UD fields work by default is
Yep, you're back.
Connection in and out. So by default, the UD fields will convert assuming there's data in them. So if you use the UD field in 803 or 905, if you populated it with data, then in the conversion, just the standard conversion tools, those fields will be created with the same exact name in 10.1 or 10.2. What does happen from a database standpoint is that it actually physically creates a new table. So customer.number01 changed to essentially customer_UD.number01. So, but the system will do all that for you, and it actually creates views. So behind the scenes, you don't really need to worry too much about it. Now, the opportunity that you have as you upgrade, though, is to make more meaningful names of those UD fields. And again, it depends on how you want to do the upgrade. If you want to do it quickly, and just get things converted, or if you actually want to start leveraging some of those new capabilities. Do you have the next set of slides, Jeff? Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I'm actually
Yeah, and
going to bring them
one
up
of the
right
things that
now.
was mentioned earlier,
Appreciate you jumping
which
in, too.
was
Thank you so
really
much.
interesting with the updatable dashboards. One of the things that happened, the way those worked was with ABL code. So we wrote all the web services with the progress code or ABL code. So that was one reason you do need to essentially regenerate them. And that's usually the easiest thing to do is essentially just recreate them. I mean, the dashboards themselves will convert, but if you just basically say, hey, regenerate all my code behind it, that works pretty well unless you had a lot of custom code. So I just wanted to comment on that. All right.
That's great. Can you see the slides now?
Yeah. So I think we
Great.
covered most of that.
Tim, how handy is it to have a principal technical solutions architect from Epicor on this call? That just worked out great.
Yeah, sometimes that does work pretty well, for sure. The only other thing I would mention on this was, with the BPMs. So what we've found is that, exactly as Brad was saying, if they have ABL code, of course, you're going to have to rewrite those. The wizard ones do work pretty well. One exception is if you used queries and conditions. So there was a capability to say, hey, for these records, by writing a query, or only do this if it hits these records. You had the opportunity to actually go in and edit that query. And if you did that, then it typically won't upgrade automatically. So one of the things you'll really need to think through is that a lot of that stuff we're talking about is replaced by better functionality. So now there's a BPM wizard where I really don't need to write as much ABL code or C# code, because I used to do that because I had a hard time accessing fields from other tables. So I almost had to write code for that. Well, now there's a lot of capabilities to be applied.
Sure.
Jeff? Yep. All right, we'll move on to the next one. All right, so reports here. Now this is where I'd love to have Brad back, because this is probably my weakest area here. But you guys probably know one of the things that's changed is that Epicor's go forward strategy with reports is SSRS, whereas in 803 and 905, most of those were in Crystal. I think in 905 maybe had the SSRS ones as well. So the Crystal ones technically will still run. A lot of them will, and even if you customize them, you may be able to kind of tweak them and they'll still run. There's some extra work that has to take place. The problem with that is kind of twofold. One, if you decide you want to move forward with a product like APR, the new print routing capability, that'll only work with SSRS. So that's one problem. The other problem is, unlike customizations, when you modify a report, you're kind of version locked. So meaning if I modified a report in 803, I'm still running that same 803 version of the report in 10.1 or 10.2 because it doesn't get the latest and greatest. Now, fortunately, most reports don't change much, so it's not that big of a deal, but there might be new functionality you're missing. This speaks to then the different types. So we kind of differentiate between the BAQ reports, the standard reports, and then external reports. And here's kind of another differentiation of database reports and dashboard reports as well. So as mentioned, each of those you need to think about different things. Do you really need them going forward? Because there might be a new report, especially for dashboards. Can you use the standard out of the box one? Because that may have some new capabilities. And then is it a cosmetic change? So if it's cosmetic, it's probably pretty easy just to grab the new one and slap a new logo on it rather than trying to migrate it or convert it.
That's terrific. Hey, I'm also looking at the time here. I wonder, because Brad only had just a couple slides left here. I wonder if we want to just jump into your section now, because we have about 20 minutes or so
Sure.
left, and give you plenty of time to cover that.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do that. Thanks.
So would you like me? I'll pass presenter over to you, and if there's any issues, I can drive. But let's.
Sure. Yeah. Let me see if I can. That'd be great.
Now, so here's the other interesting thing: is you're going to come in as Darrell, I believe.
Okay.
Folks, a little behind the scenes action here. This is our first demo webinar, so you're bearing with some of our learning curve. We practiced a lot ahead of time, but nothing goes perfect, especially in front of a live audience. So Darrell is another marketing person and was helping Tim. So so Darrell's it's him actually presenting on when it says Darrell.
Okay, so if I start sharing here, it'll probably ask me which screen. So we're gonna go to this one here, I think. All right, and should be seeing the PowerPoint that we were just looking through. I'm gonna get to my part of the presentation here.
Great.
And we will start with that. Oh, sorry, I may have opened up the wrong one. So let me.
Hey, while you're doing that, we heard that Brad is back on. So welcome back to the world of the connected and living, Brad. You did an awesome job. So thank you very much. And I know you're remote, and there are technology issues. So awesome, great. Thank you very much. And we're good.
Yes, I apologize. I get talking and I start to forget that I have an audience, and at some point my computer didn't like what I was saying and had other ideas.
You got censored.
Great.
Well,
Exactly.
great. That was great stuff, Brad. And I had a number of folks pinging me saying you're just doing great. So thank you.
So I want to make sure we're seeing the right screen. Are we seeing the Epicor upgrade slide screen, or are we seeing a different one?
Nope.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to skip that. So, one of the things that was mentioned was, there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done up front. Obviously, there's ways you can do that. You can use the existing tools. Solution Manager was mentioned. There's other tools that have been developed by the EstesGroup that certainly can help you evaluate that environment. But what would be nice would be obviously a tool that you could just run as often as you want and kind of see what the state of your environment is, even if you weren't necessarily planning on upgrading. And of course, that's something that has been pretty obvious. So that's one of the things that was developed recently. And so we have this thing called Epicor Cloud Upgrade Services, and there's a little bit of wheel and you guys can kind of see it. So the analyzer is the piece that I would encourage all of you guys to, download, contact your partner or your channel account manager as appropriate and ask them for access to this analyzer. Now, currently it runs on 803.305 and above up through E9, so any version of E9. It should be ready fairly quickly with any version of 10.x. But the focus of these tools has been primarily on the 803.305 through 9, trying to get customers converted from that. So the rest of these tools would be leveraged more on that. So the idea of this is what we tried to do is kind of package up a quick and easier way to help you upgrade. And these tools are available, to you as well as to our partners. So EstesGroup would have access to these as well. What happens is once you run the analyzer, and I'll show you some screenshots and maybe we'll get a chance to take a look at it of what that looks like. And then once you analyze your environment and you want to move forward with an upgrade, then these other tools come in. So basically the packager and transfer, as you can see, it's going to take a backup of your database. It's going to upload to a cloud environment, and then it's going to do the conversion there. So that's that automated data conversion. So it'll do the data upgrades and data migrations primarily. So you see those two pieces. The piece at the bottom, then, that's really where, again, all the things that Brad talked about was, some things will convert okay, and some are going to have to be manually manipulated. So again, the EstesGroup, Epicor, whoever your partner, who you're working with, can help you with that, or you guys can do that yourself as well if you have those capabilities. One other piece of this puzzle then is something called CloudView. So what you can do is you can actually run through this process and we'll create a cloud view environment as well, meaning an environment in the cloud where your converted data will exist. So depending on the service and the package you sign up for, you'll be able to immediately see your data converted with the new version. You don't have to have your hardware ready or anything like that, because I know sometimes that delays projects. So that's an option. And then finally, the Epicor Learning Center. There's some custom content that we've developed for this upgrade purpose that talks about, hey, what's the difference between 9 and 10.1 and 8 and 10.1 as well. So that's kind of the overall solution. Now, what I'm going to do is just introduce the pieces of it, and then we'll hopefully jump into the tooling as well. So when you're provisioned, so what provisioning means is we'll give you a user account. So that again can be done by your channel account manager or your partner. That'll give you the ability to go into this portal. And basically the idea is typically you're going to kind of come in initially and run this analyzer. So you'll download the analyzer, you'll download it on your application server, and then what it's going to do is it's going to show your report, which we'll see examples of in a minute. Now there's other pieces as well that if you decide you're going to move forward with the upgrade, then there's the other tools that you download as well. We've had, I think, about 800 customers run the analyzer, so it's been, adopted pretty well. We've got, we'd like to double that number this year as well. As I said before, even if you don't think you're going to upgrade, it's a free tool. I'd urge you to take advantage of it because it gives you some good information. These are just some screenshots of the analyzer, so there's much more to it. And again, I'd like to get into it in a minute, but sure.
I remember when you were demonstrating this out at Ignite, I was just amazed. You could go in and see what modules are running, what's going on in your environment. So to your point, putting upgrades aside, it just seems like it's a great utility to help you keep a visibility on your current environment.
It is, yeah. One of the things, if you can read that screenshot, and you probably can't read it really well, it's actually going to give you a version of the report. So if you guys wanted to run it monthly, you can see there's transaction data here that'll give you an idea of, how many orders you have, how many POs. They'll have your database sizes. So all your tables, you can kind of, again, analyze, are they getting larger? And if so, do we need to do some maintenance on them? And then for me, one of the most important pieces, if you're thinking of upgrading, or even if you don't have a good handle of your customization environment, is this analysis report, the custom area.
Hey, Tim, quick question for you that I wanted to bring in because it's really pertinent right now. Jill, thank you very much. Jill asked what type of bandwidth is required if you have 160 gigs for database?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kind of switch to that. So you don't need a great bandwidth, but obviously you need decent bandwidth. But we have compressed it. We've got a high-speed transfer, and then we have encryption as well. So we've had pretty good success with it. If you have not really sporadic bandwidth, it can be problematic. But you can see one of the nice things is even if you would get disconnected, we can resume the upload as well. So pretty good speed there as well.
Some like remote locations could still be running on T1, though it's hard to imagine, but that is still the case. But a lot of times people certainly have a couple megs. Did I just understand you correctly though, that if it does get interrupted, it will resume where it left off? It's keeping that stateful.
It is, yeah, absolutely. Great. Yeah, and I'm just gonna show quickly. So once you get the database uploaded, and keep in mind for the analyzer, you don't need to upload your database. That's actually going to run on your system and then just upload the reports. So all that is essentially an executable that runs in your environment. It's more than if we're going to do the conversion, then we're going to take the backup, we're going to bring it up to the Epicor cloud services, we're going to run the conversion, and these will be kind of similar results depending on size. It gives you a really nice report, and we've got a monitoring team that's actually checking this out. And if there's any issues, they'll basically look into it. In some cases, if you have data issues, so a lot of customers have data either because of the application or because of maybe some data you brought in that impacts upgrades and things like that. So our team will actually write scripts to clean up that data. And the great thing is we're expecting this will be a multiple pass situation where initially you just kind of see how the environment is and you get started training and looking at your data, but then you'll do a second and third pass. So once those custom scripts are developed, they'll be basically placed in this system. They'll apply to you only, and then they'll run. Now, as we find things that are more general in nature, obviously we'll incorporate them into everyone. And so one of the big differences for us is if you've tried to upgrade in the past, in some cases you've had challenges because there's not a lot of information of why it wouldn't upgrade and things like that. So we've added many scripts to help clean up data, to give more visibility, and we're finding it's going a lot quicker, it's more optimal, and again, you get great visibility into this as well. One of the other features we've added recently is reconciliation reporting as part of that process. So at the end of the upgrade, it's going to run through a list of reports, and this is what we would have told you to do manually. We would have said, hey, run this report on E9, the AP aging, and then run it on 10.1 after you convert, and then compare the transactions. As you know, those reports might be different. We may have changed them. They might be sorted differently. Some of them have totals, some of them don't. So we've taken that out. So now it's just part of the conversion. It's going to do the comparison. And when you find something that's different, like in this case, the AR aging, you can click into it and see the actual transaction, the invoice number, what the fields are that are different and things like that. So a lot of this is, again, just tools that are going to, help you convert, have more confidence that you're converting and kind of running through that. I'm going to jump out of here and jump into
while you're doing that, I just want to say, probably why don't we at 5 of, so another 4 minutes, just take a quick stop and answer Joy's question around Solution Manager. I think there's the only other question right now. And then I want to be respectful of people's time. We don't need to stop, so we'll keep going for a little bit longer to let Tim get through his slides. But for those folks that do need to drop, I just want to make sure we got any questions. So if you have any questions you want to answer, you want to ask, please do so in the chat. Joy will talk to you about your Solution Manager question. I don't know, Brad, are you back on? That was in your section. Well, if not, perhaps Tim can address it.
All right, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'll just go through this very quickly, and then we can continue it after the official stop here. So this would be the main interface once you'd be set up as a user. And then your use will look a little different, obviously, than mine. But kind of the idea is that you're going to have access to the reports once you download the analyzer and run it. And so I'm just going to go into my demo environment that I have and change the version. So you can see this is actually the demo company we use. We've got 187 different versions of the report. It gives the date when it was run. And so you can run it as many times as you want. And we want you to, because again, it's good information for you guys. From a high level, then it's going to give you information, about your environment, about your companies, about your licenses, and it's going to give you some charts and graphs here. The key part I want to focus on is, because Brad spent quite a bit of time talking about, hey, here's what you have to think about, here's what you have to identify. All that now is laid out for you. So I can come in here now and I can see that these are all the customizations I have. This one's written in C#. It's got 33 added items that I've added. It's got 100 lines of code. And we'd consider it a complex customization, meaning, if you had us convert it, then, it'd be obviously more expensive than an intermediate one. It also give you access to see the code. So if, again, if you're not in customization mode or on your system, you can just kind of come in here and you can see, all right, it looks like, we added some wizard driven type of things here. And from that, so it's giving you information about it. I think, we mentioned the BPMs as well. So the BPMs, it'll tell you, here's the type of BPM. This one is an ABL one, so it's got code behind it. And as such, it's not compatible, meaning it won't convert automatically. You're going to have to work on it and do something with it. Otherwise, if it's a wizard-driven one or a menu-driven one, it's going to show you, all right, this is what it's made up of. So that should convert automatically. Now, again, you got a checkbox field, so you might want to consider changing that. The other thing that you can use this for is then you can say, you know what, we've reviewed that one and reviewed that one and reviewed that one. We'll keep this one, but we don't want to keep the others. And it'll kind of give you a scorecard so you can use this as a place where you tell certain people to review certain things. And that will give you an idea of what's it going to cost going forward, how much effort is it? And that's kind of the idea of this. There's a lot more to this tool. You can kind of see down here, it's got, APM, all tech information. It's got menus, reports, BAQs, and all those items. But I wanted to show you that tool at least at a high level. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm not sure I knew what the solution manager question was, but let's go ahead and address that one if we can.
I enjoy type of clarification for not answering it correctly, but if I think she's asking, hey, what is the solution manager? Tell me more about that. And we'll need to keep it a little brief, and we will follow up with more detailed information afterwards. Just want to make sure we get through the questions here, and then we'll follow up directly.
Sure. Yeah. No, great question. So the solution manager tool, it allows you to package together these custom objects, basically. So it's a tool right within Epicor, right within your menu structure, and you can basically define a solution, and you can say, well, I want 10 of these BPMs and 5 of these BAQs and menus and things like that, and then it'll create a package, and then you can move it from one environment to another if you want. So right now would be a great use for anyone doing some development, and they want to have a development environment, a test, and a production environment. Solution Workbench is a great tool to move those objects. Now you can obviously export and import individual elements, through the regular tools. So I can import BPMs, BAQs, even customizations. What this does is it allows you to bundle those things together or do them in mass.
Okay, that's terrific. And Joy, let us know if you want more detailed information on that. Just in the interest of time, let's go to David's question. Have you seen any big challenges upgrading from 10.1.514 to the current release of 10.1.600?
Yeah, that's probably not best answered by me, because I've focused more on the 8 to 10 and the 9 to 10. What I would say, our general statement, because a lot of users said, well, hey, can we use these tools to go from 10.1 to 10.1? And the answer is, we may build them out for that purpose, but it's really not. It's not as difficult an upgrade in general because there's not a technology shift. Now, having said that, it's going to depend, right? If you have a lot of custom integrations, you've got service connect routines, if you've got code that's calling web services, all that stuff will certainly need to be tested, because occasionally, we change web services or we change the parameter list with that.
So what we can do, David, is we can I'll take that as a follow-up, and we'll get you some more specific information on that. Terrific. So John got back and clarified. He was wondering if we're going to cover the challenges of going from 905 to 10 as it pertains to the configurator specifically.
Yeah, and I think there were some slides. I don't know, did we get to those slides or not?
Hi, this is Brad. I'm back, and yes, we were going to cover that. We could definitely jump into that in the extra time that we have and speak to that some more.
Great, let's do that. Let's take see a couple more questions here, and then at the top of the hour, I'm gonna go back into extended time and let Tim finish up, and then Brad, you can finish up your slides as well. And by the way, I know some folks have had audio challenges. I apologize for that, but the replay, you'll be able to get the replay, so you'll have a clear recording, and you can reach out to us directly. You'll have our contact info. So you can talk to us directly, and we can give you more detailed answers. So let's see here. Julie was asking for some more detail on reconciliation reporting, and is that for testing?
Yeah, so the reconciliation reporting, what we did was we automated the process that we used to ask people to do, after they upgraded. So traditionally we would say, all right, you're upgrading from 9 to 10.1, print out these reports and then compare them in each version. Okay, so that would be a manual process. What we've done now, and I can kind of continue the demo here as well, is part of the conversion process. So once you decide, all right, we're good with the analyzer, we've identified all our things, and now we actually want to use the tooling to convert items here. So as part of that process, if I click on this one, I think it had the reconciliation reporting. We've added a step here called ERP reconciliation. So these are all the steps that go through in the process. And it looks like it's turned off right now for this one, but there'll be a reconciliation tab, and it may show better on my PowerPoint. But basically that'll be a task that gets run as part of the conversion. And then if I jump back here, oh, sorry, wrong one. If I go back to the screenshot, then literally you can sort of see this. It's not as clear as I'd like, but literally it's part of those steps. It's going to run each of these reports in both environments, and then you'll see it on the reconciliation tab. You can actually go in here and you can say, all right, these are the ones that match. You can click on the differing ones, and then you can drill right into the actual transaction. Once you know they're different, then in some ways the work begins, right? You have to identify, okay, why are they different? Is that data on our part? Is it something with the conversion process? And when I say you have to, you would obviously do that in conjunction with your partner, with Epicor, to help identify that.
Okay, great. Let's do one more question, and then we'll jump back in. We'll finish your session. Brad can finish his, and then we certainly can take questions at the end of that as well. Paolo, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Paolo's question was, is upgrade service.epicor enabled for customers?
It is, yeah. Now, again, you have to go through your CAM or your partner to get, we call it provision, but basically get a user account set up. But it's a really quick and easy process. You just, again, let them know. They'll basically add you as a user. It'll send you an email that then you can connect to those upgrade services and then download the analyzer and run that.
Terrific. Well, all right, let's go ahead and finish up your section, Tim, and then finish Brad's.
Sure.
Chris, I did just see your question. If we don't get to it, we'll certainly follow up. But we'll have Q&A after these two, after Tim and Brad finish up.
Sounds good. So I'm going to jump back into the reporting section a little bit because I flew through it so quickly, and I want to show you some of the other reasons to run this. Again, even if you're not thinking you're going to upgrade initially. So let's hit the drop down, get the right version.
By the way, this is great
we'll go
engagement,
in
folks. I appreciate the questions. You make the event a lot more fun. And this is your chance to ask some experts right here online.
Yeah, so you saw this before. So there's going to be, a number of different tabs here. So it'll show your environments, meaning what, version, database version, all that. And then down at the bottom, it's actually going to give you a list of your table sizes. Now, obviously, if you're in a SQL environment, that's not a hard thing to get. But, if you run this multiple times, then you might notice, some of these tables changing and some of the sizes changing. So that may, again, tip you off to maybe do some planning or some things like that. The next tab then has to do with licensing. So it's going to show your companies. It's going to show you how many users you have and things like that. It's also going to show you what modules you're currently licensed for. So you can kind of go through there and see, all right, which ones are we licensed for? And, then are we leveraging those? So it can be a good discussion point either for, potentially additional training from, from Epicor or from your partner or even internally and just make sure you're utilizing that as well. The company tab's kind of different from the standpoint that it also gives you some transactional information here. So you can come in here and you can see, not only your companies, but then you can see things like how many parts do we have, how many parts are on hand, and some of that stuff. So, and you can have fun with this too. You can kind of eliminate things, and the other items will change. Now, keep in mind this is actually our old demo database from E9, so you can imagine, we don't use it anymore. So I don't have transactional data listed here. On your report, though, you'll have, how many orders, how many POs, quotes, all that kind of stuff, as well as sub-ledger data and things like that. You'll also see a listing of who your active users are. So that can give you an idea. Are you set up well for licensing, and do we maybe need to add more? Or you can even see, all right, if someone's not logged in, why is that type of thing? And then the other tab is more of a list to help you as you get ready to upgrade typically. So, you know, the fact that I've got all these unposted groups, I would want to post as many of those as, you know, makes sense to post before I do the upgrade. So it's a pre-upgrade checklist. And then it also has these health checks as well. So, you know, these are things saying, hey, these are maybe some things that need to be taken care of or have been taken care of, but it's, you know, just giving you some ideas of things that'll be, you might want to consider adjusting. Now, the upgrade itself, the conversion will take care of all these items if they're not set up correctly. But if you know, if you're not upgrading, then, you know, these are some things maybe to check into as well. And then this third-party module list, this is something that we're going to keep adding to. Currently, we've only got a couple identified in here, but as the analyzer continues to be developed, we'll continue to expand on that. And then finally, the custom tab, you know, again, we talked about this a little bit, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, other than to say, you know, these are all the items that there actually will be a configurator area as well. So we're going to talk about configurator in a minute, but it will also list all your configurations that you have, and it'll tell you, you know, are we generating quotes? Are we generating orders? You know, are we using them for jobs? And it'll give you an idea how often you've used those. So it'll give you more information. The other piece that I would point out here is that you can also export this. So if I click this button, what it'll do is it'll generate a Excel file for me, and then I can go ahead and launch that. And basically what you're going to see then is a tab per tab on, sorry, a worksheet per tab here. Now the information's a little bit, it's not necessarily different from the standpoint of content, but you know, it looks a little bit different here. So things like complexity, instead of it saying medium, intermediate, and simple, it actually has a ranking here based on it. But this can be a great way to kind of share things or to split it up and even communicate with your partner, you know, when you're saying, hey, we're going to upgrade, and you know, instead of using the analyzer, we just said, you know, we set it here. So one thing to keep in mind though is it won't import back into the analyzer. So, you know, if you wanted to kind of leverage this capability, you know, meaning the keep all or to go in and keep and review them, then, you know, you'd either have to do it here or in that area as well. So that's a pretty high level fly through. The last piece you know, again, I mentioned briefly was this cloud view piece. So, you know, again, in your case, you wouldn't be seeing all this, you know, this is kind of my view of things, but the idea here is that what I can do is we can set up an environment, and we're going to, when we convert, we're going to set up two environments. There's going to be one called a vanilla environment. And what that means is that it's just going to convert the data. And then there'll be another one called the custom environment. And you'll have access to both of those in a cloud view as well as a conversion environment. But really all this means is that you don't have to have your hardware purchased and installed and in place before starting the conversion and validation process. You can actually start your project ahead of time and, you know, kind of take your time in terms of identifying things without having to purchase hardware. All right, any questions on this tool?
Here, Chris asked, is a recon only on cloud conversion or a local on site as well?
So, I'm sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean by recon?
I was hoping you would understand that. so Chris, do me a favor, just elaborate in the chat.
Yeah. So,
we'll get that
I'll answer a question that I get asked a lot. So these tools have, yeah, these, reconciliation, got it. No, reconciliation, yeah, would be available on both. Because again, it's part of the conversion, not necessarily part of the deployment piece. So as soon as it runs through the conversion tools, it'll do that reconciliation piece for you.
Awesome, Chris, thank you. Cool. For
Great.
that one.
The other thing that sometimes people, and I think now that you've seen it, you understand it. We call them kind of the cloud upgrade services. It has nothing to do with whether you're going to go SaaS or on-premise. The tools will work for either. So.
Okay, great. Joseph had a question. Just wanted you to repeat how he gets access to the upgrade services portal.
Yeah. So just ask your channel account manager. So you can email your channel account manager, and basically what they'll do is they will set up an account for you, or you can tell me right now and I'll provision you. So if
Oh,
I can get your email address, we can try it in a live basis here.
Joseph, if you're not feeling that brave, then
All right.
he gave it to you. There you go.
Should I?
Can you see it? Oh yeah, it's a JMOELLER, so J Moeller at ZOLL.com.
All right. So what'll happen?
Joseph,
Yeah,
you're
so
rock.
what
Thanks
it's
for that.
doing
This
now
is
is it's
great.
going to check against the Epic web account. And basically, if you have one, it's going to say, all right, this is who it is. And then basically I can come in and I can add you. And then it's going to basically set you up. And what'll happen now is Joseph will get an email that basically says, hey, here's, we've set you up an account. Now go in and change your password and get logged in and all that. So again, your channel account manager or your partner EstesGroup can actually has the capability to go in and we call it provisioning users.
Wow, that was great. Live
Yeah,
live action.
And we'd
there.
love to get everyone
Joseph,
provisioned. I mean, absolutely. So anyone who wants to, let us know.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think there was another question I missed here. I think that might have been it. If I've missed your question, type it again. And Brad, Tim, are you all set?
Yep, I'm good.
Well, phenomenal job. Thank you so much. And thank you also for being an on-tap expert when we had some tech challenges on our side. So great stuff. Brad, let me give it back to you. I will turn.
All right, great. And thank you for that, Tim. That was some really good stuff. I wanted just to quickly talk about, in the time we have, cover.
There we go. Let me. I'm switching it over to you. There you go, Brad.
Okay, great. All right, so I wanted to quickly talk before we get back into the slides, just briefly about some of the things that we have encountered in terms of, now that we've covered customizations in general, really your next two big ones are reports and then configurator. And I'd say in both of these, because the change is so significant from the base platform or your legacy platform to your new one, that I really try to encourage customers to get into the training mode early. Especially with a couple of key users, whoever your key people are who are going to be maintaining reports or maintaining configurators, to get themselves involved in the training process early. Now, this could mean a couple of different things. I've seen customers go off, for instance, and take a C# class, or customers go and take a SRSS class from Microsoft. I've seen varying results in terms of the benefits that came to that. And the reason is, and this was much the same in any version of Epicor, is Epicor takes an architecture and they add their own layer to it. So within that layer, you're always working within some kind of Epicor context. If you're writing C#, you're writing C# in an Epicor context. If you're creating an SRSS report, you're doing it in, again, an Epicor architecture that's going to deviate to one degree from the standard, from the vanilla. So the training you get, sometimes I find customers benefit more after they've already had an initial, training in the Epicorized version to going back to more general training. And I think I find that that customers find more benefits in that. One piece about training, again, would be you can do kind of two modes. You can go and try to do the lone wolf, dig into it yourself and try to figure out how that works and what's available. What we've seen work a little more successfully in terms of ramping up people quickly is to use a form of guided training where a customer comes, meets with one of our consultants, kind of identifies the scope of work that's required within this framework. If you're working on Configurator, you don't need to know the entire C# body of knowledge. There's a pretty small subset of logical constructs that you need to get your head around, and that will allow you to successfully build configurators. You can identify that and get some introductory training with a consultant, in a pretty short amount of time, and then go off and do some of your independent training, digging into the pieces, working through the modules, and then circling back with a consultant and answering questions, coming up with more advanced tips, kind of reviewing training, making sure that you caught the whole body of knowledge or all the important pieces before moving on. Now, that being the case, I'm going to quickly jump back into the slides and just speak to the remainder of my presentation. All right, great, thank you. And speak first to reports.
There we go. We see
now, so
right.
Reports most often differentiate themselves between their types. So when you're coming back from a legacy version, you have standard reports that you've made cosmetic changes to, or you've made data additions. You added a table to the RDD, you've done some extra calculated fields or what have you. Those kind of have one flavor. A very different flavor then would be the custom BAQ reports that you're dealing with. Those, have been built on top of a BAQ, and then a report, an RPT file in the legacy version has been built on top of that. Above and beyond that, I've seen customers who had extensive ODBC connection reports, dashboard reports were a tool that was available in earlier versions. I even have some customers who built SDK reports from scratch. God help them. And so each one of those has a different migration path, a different set of issues that come to them. And it's good when you're getting out of the gate to make sure that you've delineated between those and understand really what that scope is, because configuring a set of ODBC reports to work correctly will likely involve different steps than getting a set of BAQ reports to work in the new environment. All right, one other thing to really have to consider with reports is defining the future state, and that's how are you going to use SSRS relative to Crystal. Now with SSRS, that's the platform, that's the Microsoft platform, that's Epicor's future state platform that they're driving into the future. SSRS, or Crystal, mind you, it's given by a competing product. It's available, it works, you can configure the system to still use it, but there are no promises. So when we work with customers, our obvious first position is to try to guide them down the path of purely an SSRS model. Where this sometimes gets to be an issue is if there are time constraints, resource constraints, you have a boatload of custom Crystal reports and not enough time to convert them, then it's a matter of finding what's a reasonable go-between. Really, there's some ease of use versus maintainability questions. I think a lot of people like Crystal and its ease of use. But then the questions of, okay, with next version, are there any things you're going to need to retweak to get them going again, et cetera. So I think that's a concern that you should consider hard. I would say a lot of customers are initially frustrated with SSRS as a platform, and they bump into that and they get frustrated. That's where I think some training with someone who's been in both the SSRS and the Crystal environments and knows kind of functionally how to map between those two is of great benefit. So with our own process at the EstesGroup, what we ended up doing is when we work with a set of reports that customer needs us to help them work on, we end up to reduce the time taken to convert a report. We end up running the existing report out of the Crystal environment through a proprietary process to convert that report into an SSRS format, and then work from there to tweak and fine tune and tailor that report so that it can be moved and worked with inside the Epicor 10 environment. That allows us to cut down some of that time and the cost associated with that while still getting to that future state. For us as a consulting firm, that's been the best path forward for addressing those kind of challenges. Moving to configurators, there's a lot to discuss there, and this would be worth its own webinar, honestly. Again, I find there's probably two different modes that people go through when they're doing configurator upgrades. And one is, again, what you might call a straight conversion, where you migrate a test environment, you review what's been upgraded as your starting point, and you tweak it as needed. I think the way that the standard conversion moves things, you would probably never really build a configurator that way in 10. And for that reason, I think a lot of customers that I've run to have been doing one form of re-implementation. And that is rebuilding the configurators from scratch in a test environment, using as much from the legacy that they can. This might include copy and pasting the inputs from one environment to another. That's a pretty easy thing to do in 10 to get all of your user inputs onto your building surface. And then analyzing what's from the legacy system that could be modeled, rebuilt, or tweaked as needed. And really, these are kind of the pieces then within that become important, or trying to identify out of your existing configurators, where are the key pieces where your logic has been stored. And this is, I haven't run an upgrade process on this, so it'd be interesting to see what depth it gets to. But the things that you're trying to understand is, how did you build these in your legacy version? Are you firing a lot of things on leave events? Are you firing them on page leave events? Are you firing them when the page loads? Where are the places that you have this logic? Do you find yourself doing a lot of duplicate logic? I think the legacy configurators quite often steered engineers and configurator designers down the path where they had to duplicate a lot of logic. And those are obvious things that you want to eliminate from just a best practice programming principle. And Epicor's the 10 version offers what are called UD methods, which are a real clever way of taking a common code block and making it into essentially a callable function that can be called and recalled without the need for duplicating code in multiple places. Also, the idea of where your core rules reside. Do you have your rules up in the user interface? Do you have that buried down in the method rules? And again, what's the best place to try to organize that? And really what we're looking here is we're trying to balance functionality and maintainability. Now, there are some tools out there that you can convert an ABL code block into a C# code block. And those give, I think, quite often a very good starting point. Sometimes the way that code gets converted might not be in a manner that the customer wants in terms of long-term maintainability. I think like Progress, the C# language, you can write the same output in a couple of different ways, and some ways are a little more self-explanatory to end users. What we've done from an EstesGroup standpoint is we created kind of a library, and we're updating it as we go with solutions that we provided in C# and the solutions that they came from in ABL. So this isn't a one-to-one code conversion, but it's much more of a kind of an architecture process to say, okay, this is what I was doing. I was doing a for each loop, and I was creating a TT table in ABL. Well, now this is how you can use a for each loop and create a data table in C#. And these are sort of the areas where you might get from this place, this design format in Progress to this design in C#. And in my mind, those are really the key pieces to successfully understanding how to convert a configurator would be that identification process. Done a number of sessions with customers coming up where we've come on site and done just that, gone through their configurator code with them to understand, okay, these are the places where code exists, and these are the places where we might need to do things further. And in the end, that's where, from an EstesGroup standpoint, we find a lot of our upgrades, be they just a technical upgrade or an overall entire business process upgrade, start with a in-depth business process review, where we come in, go through your processes, your procedures. These can be tailored to the business and the scope of what they need to cover. But really, we found it's helpful to get that baseline of understanding of where a customer is at and what they're doing, and use that as your platform for moving forward. So definitely would be there if that's something that's needed out there. Be very willing and interested in talking with you further. So Jeff, I think that's pretty much where I'm at. I think I can turn it back over to you if we have extra questions and anything else we want to cover.
And thank you so much. And let me just put this back up on the screen right now for, pardon me, for contact info. I was trying to multitask in my mind there sometimes in my mind.
Sure can,
it's not
Jeff.
a great thing. Okay, let's see here. Can everyone see my slide? Great. So what I would suggest is take a screenshot of Brad, Ben's, and Bruce's contact info. Contact them directly. And when this seminar ends, if we've configured it correctly, you should be brought to a landing page to request access to the slides, to request access to the replay. This replay is supposed to be just like experiencing this live, so it should be terrific. What I'm going to do, I've captured all of the questions, and we're going to answer them in more detail. And then I'm going to send them to everybody that was, I'll of course anonymize it, but I'm going to send it to everyone who was on our list today. So even folks that weren't here will see these questions, and they'll still have the opportunity to register for the replay. So if they missed it, that's okay. Before we drop, I want to ask if there's any more questions. If you have any more questions, put them in the screen. Just take a moment. And, almost everyone, we kept probably 3/4 of the audience on, and there was a really good crowd today. So thank you so much. And to me, that is indicative that we had great content. Our presenters, we had great presenters and experts here. So thanks very much. So it doesn't look like there's any other questions. You've been very generous with your time today. We appreciate it, and we really wanted to share with you. So have a wonderful Thanksgiving coming up, and look for follow-up from us shortly. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.